Hey guys, what is up? It is SSD Middleman here with GuidesForUsAll, and today we're going to be checking out all of the hammers in Dark Souls 2. As always, click on the screen if you want to skip to a certain one, and if not, let's get started with the Homunculus Mace. This mace is interesting to say the least. If you look at it, it looks like it's got a lot of parasites growing on it. You can get it from Chancellor Welliger in the Drangleic Castle. You can also get it as a pre-order bonus, or by having the Black Armor edition of Dark Souls 2. Now, this weapon, obviously, since you can get it at the beginning, is a pretty nice starting weapon, as at plus 10 it will have 290 base damage, B scaling in strength, B scaling in dexterity. You upgrade it with regular Titanite, obviously, and it's a decent weapon. I don't personally use it very much, but at 40 strength and dexterity you could be doing about 380 damage, and it's got quite an interesting moveset as well. I don't know how to describe it, but since it is an item you can get right at the beginning of the game if you pre-ordered it, it could be useful to you, but I personally prefer the regular mace, as you can buy two of them, dual wield them, and stomp through the game, but we'll be talking about that soon enough. Anyways, moving on to the Craftsmens Hammer. You can get this in the secret chest in Steady Hand McDuff's workshop. All you have to do is light the pyre that is in his workshop with your flame by, starting the flame at the bonfire, walking in there, lighting it, go back to the bonfire, rest at it, then go back in there and open his chest. You could also kill him, but personally, I don't recommend killing Steady Hand McDuff. He is one of the greatest characters in the game. Anyways, you're going to have to upgrade this boy with Twinkling Titanite. At plus 5, it's going to be doing 250 base damage with a B scaling in strength. So this thing has some decently high damage, high counter damage as well, and high durability. But the moveset is a little awkward. And you'll hear me say the same thing about the other hammer, which I believe is called the Blacksmiths Hammer. But this weapon is just awkward to use. The range on it is very short, and the hitbox that it hits in is very awkward. I tried fighting a couple different enemies with this, especially the Looking Glass Knight, and I just found that I couldn't hit them sometimes, just because of the fact that the weapon's range was so awkward that after I dodged their attack, I'd try to hit them, and it just wouldn't line up and hit them. So, anyways, like I said, it does have high damage, and it's probably useful against certain enemies, and the fact that you can get it so early on makes it another one of those hammers that you can just throw onto your character if you don't know what else to use. Also, as a side note, you cannot infuse this weapon with bleed for some reason. Anyways, moving on to the regular mace, which you can purchase from Blacksmith Lenegrast in Majula for 1,200 souls. These things are amazing, and I say that because I recommend buying two of them and just running through the game, power stancing these boys, because I have done runs where I just go straight to Majula, buy the mace twice, and then that's the only weapon I use throughout the whole game. Because when these things are power stanced and you infuse one of them with lightning, at plus 10 on each, you're going to be doing crazy damage. It's insane. You can easily kill the Ruin Sentinels with like 5 hits each. It makes that boss fight so trivial, even at low levels. Anyways, especially since most of the enemies in the first half of the game are vulnerable to strike damage, but I still think it holds through all the way to the end. Okay, at plus 10, you're going to have a 240 base damage with an A scaling in strength and an E scaling in dexterity. That's right, an A scaling in strength. Yes! These things are amazing. So this only needs 12 strength and 5 dexterity to use. You're going to want to max out your strength as much as possible to buff up that damage, and this thing will be going crazy. Power stance. Power stance it. Trust me. You will not regret it. Anyways, moving on to the regular club, you can get this from the Merchant Hag Malentia in Majula for 800 souls. I also recommend getting two of these and power stancing them because they can also put out a ton of damage as well. Now, you do upgrade them with regular Titanite. At plus 10, you'll be doing 210 base damage, which is slightly less than the mace, but the club does have an S scaling in strength, no scaling in dexterity. Now, that S scaling will allow you to do a crap load of damage at high levels of strength. Now, I personally prefer the maces. That's just my thing because I've used them more. But I will probably be doing a run pretty soon with just power stance clubs to see how they hold up against the other weapons. But if you've seen the video here, this character I'm using has 50 strength and dexterity, and he does a ton of damage with these regular clubs. Like, they look like a little bit of like a joke weapon, like they're just some stupid weapon you get at the beginning of the game. But these things are very, very strong. They hit surprisingly hard, and the swing is pretty fast for a club weapon. So yeah, let me know if you like any of these weapons in particular, which one's your favorite. But moving on to the Morningstar, which is yet again another weapon you can get very early on to the game in Majula. If you drop down the cliffs while you're heading back from not No Man's Wharf, the tutorial part of the game. The name slips my mind for some reason. But you drop off the cliff there, then drop off once more and turn around. There is the Morningstar. At plus 10, you'll be doing 220 base damage, and you'll have an A scaling in strength. Now, obviously, since this is the first hammer you can get, you might think that it's probably not that good, and you would be right, unfortunately, since you can only get one of these. It's not easy to power stance them without, using a bonfire ascetic or something, but it is a decent weapon. Like I said, 220 base damage and an A scaling in strength makes this thing decent, but I would just buy 2 maces and then go pumping through the game, because with the mace you get 240, an A scaling and an E scaling in dexterity. So that's just my personal opinion. It's an interesting weapon. Give it a shot if you're looking for a little more variety, but I am a fanboy of the maces. Anyways, moving on to the reinforced club. You can get this bad boy from Laddersmith Gilligan for 2,000 souls. At plus 10, you will have an A scaling in strength and 260 base damage, which is indeed higher than the mace, which I've been fanboying over and comparing everything to for some reason. It's a decent weapon, in my opinion, but unfortunately the scaling is inferior to the default club, since it only has an A scaling and the club has an S scaling, which eventually leads to the normal club doing more damage than the reinforced club, which I think is just a bit silly. I mean, earlier on in your strength leveling, this weapon will be more powerful, but later on the normal club gets better. It's still a fun weapon to use. The moveset is just a little bit different than the club. I'm not sure if it swings slower or if that's just the psychological effect that the game plays on me, but it always seems to me when there's a weapon kind of upgraded from the previous version that it swings just a little bit slower if it's meant to do more damage. I don't know. It's probably just me being crazy. Anyways, moving on to the Mace of the Insulant. To get the Mace of the Insulant, you'll need to go to the Undead Crypt, and after you drop down into that hole after those Shield Knights, the pathway that you use to actually progress forward, nearby that there will be a gravestone with this on the body. Now, this weapon is one of the most interesting weapons that you can find inside of the Dark Souls 2 world, and the reason for that is that this can cast both hexes and miracles. Now, you might think that there was a twin blade that you could cast stuff with, so why is this one so special? Well, the great thing about this weapon is since it is a mace, it's more viable to power stance, especially with the low stat requirements of 15 strength, 10 dexterity, and 10 faith. I mean, yeah, 10 faith, it is faith. So you can power stance these things, and the left one will swing just like a regular mace, meaning that if you're power stancing this, you'll be able to swing with both maces and still use the R2 to cast hexes and miracles. Now, the amazing thing about that is if you don't power stance them, or if before you start power stancing them, you can use a hex or a miracle to buff your weapons. So let's say you have crystal magic weapon. You can use the one on the left to buff the one on the right, and you can use the one on the right to buff the one on the left, effectively giving you power stanced crystal weapons, which is awesome. Super cool. I've seen maybe one person do this in PvP. It is super useful. It is awesome, and you can deal out a crap load of damage with these things if you use that, especially with the variety of the moveset you have with your melee, your hexes, and your miracles. This weapon is just insane. Anyways, to the stats. At plus 10, you'll be doing 100 base damage, 90 lightning damage, and 160 dark damage with a D scaling in strength, C scaling in dexterity, E scaling in lightning, D scaling in dark. Holy crap, that's a mouthful. This weapon is insane, and it is also the only weapon in the game besides the, the Drake Blood Greatsword that can inflict all damage types at the same time if you infuse it with dark and use the Flame Weapons Miracle on it. Crazy. Just crazy. What did I tell you? This weapon is insane, and I definitely recommend picking 1 or 2 of these up to give the variety moveset a shot. Now, you will need to use a bonfire ascetic, obviously, on the second bonfire in the crypt, so that it will respawn, so that the drop will be there again, so you can power stance these. But it is so worth it. It is a crazy weapon. I don't know how many times I have to say that to get it through your mind that this weapon is freaking incredible. Anyways, moving on to the Handmades Ladle, which is another one of the most incredible weapons in the game. To get this, you're going to need to go kill the 2 Cyclopses on the beach in Things Betwixt. Then you will need to go back to Millibeth, which is one of the old ladies that are laughing crazily at you when you're changing your face in the beginning of the game, and she will give you this absurdly powerful weapon. This weapon's crazy. It's very overpowered. Super overpowered. At plus 10, you'll be doing 40 base damage. you'll be doing 40 base damage. Now, you cannot get another one by using a bonfire aesthetic. You actually have to go into New Game Plus to get a second Handmades Ladle if you plan on power stancing this. Now, you might be thinking, this thing has such low base damage, and it breaks so fast. How can this thing be useful ever? Ever! Well, I'm going to start off by saying that it actually gives you a stat increase when you equip it. You'll get +1 vitality, +1 endurance, +2 adaptability, and +1 dexterity. I mean, sorry, -1 dexterity. Which you might be thinking, okay. Well, what you can do with this weapon is if you have very even levels, for me, I had all of my levels above 20, you infuse this weapon with Mundane. And how Mundane works is it will scale damage up to whatever your lowest stat is. So if your lowest stat is 20, this thing will actually be doing decent damage like what you're seeing on screen. Now, like I said, since you have to have all your stats above 20 or so, you're going to have a high soul level. And when you're playing at high soul levels in PvP, you tend to get paired up with some interesting people. That's all I will say. And another benefit of infusing it with Mundane is since the ladle breaks quickly, you only lose that 20 base damage, which is actually around 10 when you infuse it with Mundane, when it breaks. So the broken ladle, it doesn't matter that it's broken, because you only lose about 10 damage, which isn't that big of a deal compared to the 200 or so you'll be dealing with the Mundane ladle. Anyways, this is a weapon that you need to get at some point. Give it a shot. It is fun as hell. And when you walk into a PvP fight and pull out the ladle, enemies are so confused. They have no idea how the hell to react. And sometimes they even just let you kill them. Anyways, moving on to the Blacksmiths Hammer. You can get this from Blacksmith Lenegrast. If all of his dialogue is exhausted and 8,000 souls are spent on upgrades or reinforcements, I think you can spend them on both, but I've heard some people say you have to spend them on reinforcements, you have to spend them on upgrades, you have to spend them on stuff in the shop. I don't know exactly because I do all of those things with Lenegrast. Of course, you could just kill him to get this weapon, but I personally don't recommend doing that because I love Blacksmith Lenegrast. Anyways, not much to say about this weapon. At +10, you'll be doing 290 base damage with a B scaling and strength. Some decent damage, but it suffers the exact downfall of the Craftsmens Hammer, and that is that the reach is very awkward and very difficult to use. You'll have to be very close to the enemies, and I'm going to keep saying the word very because this weapon is very awkward. Anyways, that's really all I have to say about it. It's a fun weapon to use, though. You can kind of cosplay as some of the blacksmiths in the game and go beat the crap out of people. That's the fun of Dark Souls 2 anyways, right? Moving on to the Black Dragon War Pick, arguably one of the biggest pains in the asses to obtain in all of Dark Souls 2. Now, it drops from one of the Dragon Knights in the Dragon Shrine, which you might be thinking, okay, there's 3 of those guys, I'll just go in there, kill them, farm it, go over and over again. It only drops from the one that wields the Black Dragon War Pick, meaning that there is effectively one enemy in the game that drops this, and to make it worse, there is exactly a 1% chance for this weapon to drop. You heard me right, meaning you'll have to kill him hundreds of times to be guaranteed this drop. It took me about 4 or 5 ascetics to get this weapon. And just so you know, yes, the same does apply to the other 2 dragon guys. They also have unique weapons with a 1% drop chance. I managed to get one of the other ones, but there's still one that evades me. Anyways, what's so special about this weapon? Well, you upgrade it with Petrified Dragon Bones, and at +5 you'll be doing 330 base damage with no scaling. Weird, right? No scaling. So just 330 damage. But the requirements are 20 strength and 15 dexterity. So I guess if you're low soul level, you could use this thing, and it does a lot of damage for a low soul level character, but you have to be so far into the game, and you have to spend so many bonfire aesthetics to farm this thing, that you'll be at a high soul memory before you can even slap this thing on your character. So unless you have a buddy that's gotten this weapon and is willing to invade your world and drop it for you, you're not going to be able to use it. But I still like the weapon. It looks really cool, and it is fun to use, especially since some people don't even know this weapon exists, due to the fact that there is little to no chance you will ever accidentally get this weapon. Although I do always get a comment from somebody on these videos that say, oh, I just got this weapon while I was playing through, I didn't even know it was rare. And to you I say, congratulations, you lucky son of a gun. Okay, anyways, but since there is no scaling, I do recommend infusing this weapon with raw, because you will not lose any scaling, you will just gain pure damage. Anyways, moving on to the Aldea Hammer. which is not as much of a pain in the ass to farm. You can get these from the Dragon Acolytes in Aldea's Keep. Those are the guys that have that weird blue glow, and wield these hammers and swing them at you like crazy freaks. You'll also have to deal with those giant ogres in Aldea's Keep, which is just a pain. But, nevertheless, you do only have to use regular Titan on this weapon. And at plus 10, you will be doing 240 base damage with a B scaling in strength and a D scaling in dexterity. The damage on this thing, it's okay, but it is mediocre when you compare it to the normal Mace and Club, especially since their scaling is fantastic. And the Mace and the Club, you can get two of them, like, right there at the beginning of the game. Literally right there at the beginning of the game. And might be sounding a little angry throughout this video, and that's just because most of the hammers don't live up to the original Mace and Club, which is just so weird to me, because some of the other weapons in this game that are super hard to obtain have some special little thing about them, or there's a reason that you'd want to get them, but these weapons, there's just not much reason other than cosplaying. But, nevertheless, I do appreciate the variety. This weapon is unfortunately not very strong, but like I said, cosplays are what keep this game super interesting. Moving on to the last, but definitely not the least, the Barbed Club of the Flexile Sentry. All you gotta do to get this one is go to Straight of Alaphus and trade him the Flexile Sentry Soul. You do not want to prostitute Strayed off, like I said in the last video. Don't trade Strayed. Let's get that trending on Twitter, hashtag don't trade Strayed. Anyways, you upgrade this weapon with Petrified Dragon Bone. At plus 5, you'll be doing 270 base damage with a C scaling in strength and a C scaling in dexterity. I don't know why I didn't think of this when I was using the video, but you're probably going to want to power stance these to get your Flexile Sentry cosplay on point. Again, though, like all other hammers in the game, this weapon doesn't have incredible reach, so you will probably have a little bit of trouble hitting some of the enemies. But it is still just a ton of fun to use. Just look on screen. Become the Flexile Sentry. You saw him swinging those weapons. You thought his weapons were scary when he was flying at you with them. And also the dual face and the lizard thing and the tube. That was pretty freaky on the first try. Anyways, this weapon's pretty fun to use. Not my favorite, but like I always say, variety is the spice of life. I promise. I say that all the time. Just trust me on that. Anyways, thanks for watching the video, guys. If you enjoyed, please leave a like rating down below and subscribe to see some more videos in the future. Leave a comment down below letting me know what your favorite hammer is, and if you diss the mace, I will send you away to a bad place, probably Nicaragua. I don't know, I just insulted somebody that lives in Nicaragua. I'm so sorry, I've never been there. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.